Today on the program, we host a very preeminent and a very well-known Zimbabwean by the name of Eddie Cross. He's a politician, retired now, I believe, and he's also a businessman. So we'll be talking about politics, business, the economy, and all things Zimbabwean. Thank you for tuning in. Mr. Cross, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you
to the program.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let's go straight into it. Let's speak about Eddie Cross, the politician. Mm-hmm. When does your political career begin?
I was a student at the University of Zimbabwe, studying economics, and I'm a church person. I'm a Christian. I was very much involved in Christian youth work, and I was invited to Mbari to speak to the Methodist Church young people on a Friday night. And I went out to Mbari and I spoke to this group of about 300 young people. And in the meeting, unbeknown to me, was a young man, Chimusoro, who had just returned from training as a ZAPU cadre, Zipper army.
Right.
And he was sitting in the group, and after the meeting, he approached me, and we got talking. And I then spent a couple of weeks with him in Mbari, discovering a world I hadn't seen before, because I was a young white student. I'd been raised up in white communities, lived in the suburbs, and suddenly I was confronted with a different world. And that changed my life. He became a Christian. He never went back to the war, but I became a political activist. And the reason why I became a political activist was because I felt that young black Zimbabweans never saw a white person who would try and stand up for them in those days.
Yeah.
This is a long time. This is 1965, 66.
Just after UBI.
Just after UBI. And that really, he changed my life. And I became a political activist, and I became very, very active. Of course, I was at the university. It was not difficult.
Right.
Many of my friends at university were quite radical. I didn't join any of the nationalist parties, but I became well known, and I supported the liberation struggle. It was not in those days. I was detained by Smith in '69 for my political activities, and at independence I sat on the platform with Mugabe. I was on the platform at Independence Day at Rufaro, because I played a role in the transition. I became an economist, I worked as an economist, and I helped train the incoming cabinet in 1980. So that's how I became a political activist.
Right. And so from that moment, going now into you becoming a member of the opposition MDC, becoming an MP eventually, and a very senior member of the party. How did that happen?
Right. Well, in 1995, 96, I was the chairman of the Industrial Employers Association, and we had about 37 trade unions, and I had to negotiate with the trade union movement. And at one of our meetings, we used to have a summit, a labor summit, twice a year. At one of our meetings, a young man walked through the door and immediately dominated the room. And I asked the guys, who's this? It was Morgan Tsvangirai. Okay. In the next 5 years, we had a lot of interchange, but mainly on labor matters, because I was chairman of the industrial organization, and I was vice president of CZI, and I chaired the employers group. And so I got to know him well. And in 1999, when he formed the MDC, he phoned me up and he said, would I join the MDC as Secretary for Economic Affairs? And I said to him, yes.
Immediately?
Yeah, immediately.
Okay.
So I went to Highfield. I went to, it was in Chimusoro. We launched in Chimusoro. We had the opening rally at Ruparo Stadium. And I can remember walking into Ruparo Stadium as this lone Marungu in this huge crowd. And I spent 17 years with Morgan.
Wow.
Yeah.
And maybe if you can give a brief about the late Tsvangirai, how was he to work with personally and also professionally as a leader?
But he was a very powerful personality. I mean, to walk into a room with 37 captains of industry and 37 labor leaders, trade union leaders, and dominate the room. You've got to know this is, and he's only 37 or something, 38. You've got to know this was quite a guy. And the one thing I could go with Morgan anywhere in Zimbabwe, and he would be recognized and respected. And I think when he formed the party, Mugabe thought he would never get anywhere. He just ignored it. And then, of course, you know, in 1980, in 2000, we nearly defeated them.
Almost.
There was a big shock because it came out of the blue. Man of great courage. His wife was a superb woman. And his wife really was his moral compass. And she was a fine Christian. Morgan was a Catholic. She was a Methodist. But you didn't get to see Morgan if she didn't approve of you.
Wow.
She was the gatekeeper.
Wow.
Between the two of them, a very powerful political couple. And when he died, I was with him about 24 hours before he died at home.
In South Africa?
No, here.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And had breakfast with him. We were out in the garden, and I knew that he was dying. And he knew.
Tell.
Oh no, he was very sick.
Yeah.
And I said to him, you know, Morgan, the one thing you've done in the last 17 years, you've restored Zimbabwe as a democracy. When we started, it was a one-party state. And what you've done is you've reestablished democratic principles in Zimbabwe. And I said, whatever else we haven't achieved, we never achieved taking power. Whatever else happened, you can remember that this was your great achievement. He was a fantastic guy. When he died, my spirit left politics. I didn't approve of Chamisa. I thought he was a young, immature man, a clever guy, but brains doesn't make you a national leader. And I thought he needed much more maturity. So I actually then, shortly after my second term in Parliament, I decided to retire.
So would that have been driven basically by the death of the leader, that is Tsvangirai?
Partly, but mainly because I was 78, 79, and I felt it was time for young people to take the lead. I still feel that. I think one of the greatest, look in Mozambique. Frelimo has just elected a man who's 47 years old. He's born free, okay, as next president. We've yet to go through that. My generation is still running Zimbabwe. And I include, you know, the president in that and the cabinet and so on. It's time for the next generation. And what I hope sincerely about this president is that he spends the next 4 years not just running the country, but preparing succession. Because, you know, you take that young man in Mozambique, he was educated in the Rari. Yeah, he speaks Shona and Ndebele and English perfectly.
Wow.
So he's very much a man of the region, but he's got a lot to learn. A lot to learn. And so, because only when we get through this liberation generation will we really start to see progress. And we've got lots of young people with good leadership capacity here, lots of them.
Speaking of young people and leadership capacity, like you just referred a few minutes ago, you don't seem to have much, I would say much respect in courts for Chamisa's leadership. Where do you think they lack in his leadership? Is it the age or it's something else?
It's maturity. it's not a question of age, because he's 47 now or something.
Right.
He's middle-aged now.
He's a grown man now.
He's the same man as the guy who's taking presidency in Mozambique. And he's very clever. He's a clever guy.
That's Chamisa.
Okay? Yeah. But the word, Shona have a word, Chimusoro. He's a Chimusoro.
Okay.
You know, which means a clever guy, but in that sense.
Right.
But when I went to see him in 2019, after he had lost the election in 2018. He was beaten in 2018 by 300,000 votes. He was
Officially,
beaten. No, he was beaten. Not just officially, real.
So you say the 2018 election was free and fair?
Not free and fair.
But he was
It was recorded properly.
Right.
You know, if you think ZANU challenged 25 seats of MDC in 2018, not one seat, not one vote was changed because the counting was done properly. And Emmerson took a huge risk with that because he allowed the count. You know, in 2008, when we won the election, Morgan got 57 or 58% of the vote. Mugabe 27. Makoni got 18. Makoni got 18.
But officially, you are saying you've got 8.
Yeah, they just manipulated the vote. They burnt the ballot boxes and they manipulated the vote. They just crooked the vote. But when I went to see Nelson in 2019, I said to him, I pleaded with him, go into Parliament as the leader of the opposition. Spend the next 5 years in opposition. You sit in Parliament across the row from the President in question time. This guy is sharp. He can handle himself. So people can see you every Wednesday. They can hear you every Wednesday. He said, no, the President was not elected. I don't recognize him. I'm not prepared to go into Parliament. That was his big mistake. Because when he decided, and the President offered him an office in the House, offered him a car, a driver, protection, offered him all the benefits of the official opposition leader. And Chamisa turned it down. And of course, that did two things. Next 5 years, where was he? And also, he lost the opportunity to learn how to govern. When we went into the GNU in 2009, we had no clue how government worked.
Right.
No clue. I worked for the President, for the Prime Minister for the next 4 years. We had a lot to learn. And ZANU just ran circles around us.
With all the experience.
Yeah. The guy who really set Singapore up, Lee Kuan, he spent 10 years in opposition before he won an election. 2 terms in opposition. And what he was doing in opposition, he was learning about government. I mean, I don't know what Daniel Chapo is going to do in Mozambique. 5 months to an election. And he gets appointed as president. Goodness gracious me. You know, he's got a lot to learn in a very short space of time.
But he's got the machine of a limo. So
and he's got the party.
Yeah.
And the old boys will nurture him and look after him.
Right.
And guide him.
Right.
Which is great.
Right.
But I thought that was a big mistake. And then after this last election, then they won more than 1/3 of the vote. Chamisa got 2 million votes. And then he throws it away. Why does he allow the Secretary General to ruin it, to wreck his party? Let me tell you, if the Secretary General had done that to Morgan, believe me, there would be Hondo. He would be out in minutes. And he not only allowed him to come in, but allowed him to tear the party apart. Where's the opposition today? It doesn't exist. ZANU's got their 2/3 majority.
Yes, I wanted to ask that position for your comment on the state of the opposition at the moment. Like, what do you think basically it stands right now? Seeing Chamisa left his party, basically, I'd say midway, and right now he's partyless. You know, there's a movement saying
Chamisa's finished. He can't resurrect himself. This is somebody new has to emerge now. And I've spoken to the President. I've said to the President, this President, Emmerson Mnangagwa, I've said to him, your biggest threat in the next 4 years is that somebody will emerge, like Morgan did in 1999. someone with charisma, someone with capacity, someone with money and grassroots support, and then you'll be in trouble. And and I think that that's where the future is going to lie. In the present, I mean, all the leadership of the MDC, hopeless. Hopeless.
There is no chance of the MDC coming back.
No, I don't think so. I think it's dead. I think we now need a new political party. And I think I would advise the new leadership come into opposition in 28. Sit in opposition. Learn about government. The committees in Parliament are very powerful. And, we used to control the parliamentary, the portfolio committees. And it gives you a lot of power and a lot of learning. That's where Parliament really works.
But to Chamisa's defense, if I may play the advocate right here, Peskov is very popular. Very, very popular. Would that not assist him in resurrecting his political career as you seem to think it's there? His popularity and his charisma alone.
No, I don't think it'll carry him.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think it'll carry him. Being popular with the street kids is not enough. You can have a rally and call 100,000. We did that many times. Right. Have a rally, you get 100,000 people there, all shouting, yo, and it doesn't translate into a victory. Right. You've got to work at it. For example, you've got to have structures. Morgan, when he decided to launch the party back in 2005, was it? No, 1995. When he started to launch the party, he spent 5 years building structures. We had committees in every ward. We had committees in every constituency. And we had structures throughout the country. When Morgan was removed from the leadership of MDC by Watchman Lube in that internal coup, 2005, and I stayed with Morgan, along with the majority. And Morgan said, I'm going to fight for the MDC. So all he did was to call for a Congress on Voice of America, one interview. And 2 weeks later, we had 23,000 people in the sports center. I arrived on a Friday afternoon from Bulawayo, and I drove past the sports center and I thought, oh, doesn't look busy. I walked into the sports center, 23,000 people. They walked. They came by train. They came by bus. Every corner of the country was represented. And then on Saturday, we had a discussion. We got it down to 18,000 genuine delegates, sorted out the people who were not real delegates. Sunday, we had elections. It was a celebration of democracy. Morgan was elected unopposed. And after that, there was no argument. Everybody, all the international community knew Watchman didn't lead anybody. So Morgan was the man. And, but I mean, how could Chamisa resign from his own party?
But again, to his defense, he may cite the issue whereby he went to court several times, and his people went to court as well, and they all seem to be losing every single court case. That's why they now say there's lawfare in Zimbabwe. The government is using the courts to fight. So he had no breathing room, one should say.
Sir, what's new? What's new? Do you think the court supported us on the MDC? I went to court 70 times during the 10 years I was in. My wife went to prison 3 times.
Were you in Parliament?
Yeah. The courts did not support us. The courts did not defend us. We were on our own. And if Chamisa, as a barrister, doesn't understand that, what kind of world he's been living in? You can't rely on the courts. This is a political fight. And if you look at what did he do with the structures? He did not maintain the structures which we left behind. He did not maintain them. Go to Binga. Go to Cholocho. Go to Mazarabani. Go anywhere in the country. Where are the structures? Where's the organization? If you're going to win an election, you have to be on the ground. And you have to be able to watch every polling station. How did I win my seat? I got 78% vote in 2013. Biggest majority of any MP in Zimbabwe. Mine. In Bulawayo. Bulawayo South. Black constituency. Black low-income constituency. How? I was organized. Every polling station, my people were there. When ZANU tried to do something funny at one polling station, I knew about it within 15 minutes. And we stopped it. And when they tried to falsify the presidential ballot in my constituency, 2013, they falsified the presidential ballot. They reduced the vote actually, which Morgan got in 2013. When that happened, within 2 hours, I was able to call the Electoral Commission and say, your figures are wrong. This is the figure. And they agreed with me. Next hour, it was corrected. That's how you win an election. By Sarakawanda.
Right.
You have to work.
Chamisa, again to his defense, he put forward the theory that the ruling party will infiltrate the structures. So to avoid infiltration, he wanted to do away, he wanted to have a fluid structure where there was no particular structure that was identifiable. So essentially, it became a structural party, again, as a form of strategy for him to play along with the other players.
Do you really think that you can hold a political meeting in Zimbabwe and it's not infiltrated? I mean, when the unity government was formed, we had a number of ministers working for the MDC who in the next government became ministers for ZANU. Professor Mavima, currently Minister of
Education.
Chimusoro. Where was he in 2012, 2010? MDC.
Oh, that's all.
Of course, yes. He was a minister in our government. Infiltration is a fact of life. The building next to the MDC headquarters in town here was bought by the military intelligence. The building over the road was CIO. Everybody who walked through the door was photographed. Every conversation was listened to. No secrets. You know, I could tell you lots of stories. The leadership of the party went to Zambia to have a political meeting in Livingstone. We hadn't been there for 4 hours. Then the CIO were at the hotel we were staying in, monitoring our meetings. It's not just infiltration. These guys are very sophisticated. And I said to Chamisa in 2019, I said, you have no idea what you're up against. Morgan knew, and Morgan simply organized the people. And that was something that ZANU could not counter. I mean, 2005, do you think Morgan didn't win that election? That night, do you remember that night? When the queues, 2 kilometers long,
Right.
We were voting for 3 days. We ran out of time. They had to extend the voting for another day. Do you remember? Do you really think that Mugabe won that election? It's a joke. But we didn't take power. And in those days, our biggest problem was that South Africa was not supporting the opposition. South Africa was part of the opposition to us in Zimbabwe.
By virtue of them being a sister liberation movement first, that ANC and then here.
But I don't think it was quite like that. I think the reason why the ANC felt that MDC was a problem for them was that if MDC became the governing party in Harare, Cosatu would leave the alliance and form a political party,
just like the MDC.
Yeah, and like Lula in Brazil, again a Labour-based party, and they took power. And if Cosatu left the ANC, what would be left? 4.8 million members of COSATU, 167 in the ANC, 98,000 in the Communist Party. Who are the big boys? Who had the money? The trade union movement. So Mbeki saw that. And Mbeki recognized that MDC was a threat to the power base of the ANC in South Africa. So they did everything in their power to prevent us coming. Those judges who came to look at the results of the 2005 election, you think they didn't know what happened? They knew. They knew. And it was in their report. But it didn't make any difference because it was not in the interest of the ANC to allow MDC to become leaders in Zimbabwe.
Let's talk about your relationship with the president, the current President Mnangagwa. He has been ZANU-PF basically all his life, political life at least. And you have been from the opposition. When did you find each other to the point of you writing his biography and now being a close associate?
I was in the opposition in 1980.
You were basically...
I supported Mugabe.
Right.
I supported ZANU.
Right.
I was appointed to 2 big jobs by Mugabe. I did a lot of work for the government in those days.
Right.
I was on the platform at independence. You didn't get in that position by being neutral. I was not neutral. I was. But in 1987, when Gukuru was really reaching its climax, I did something in 1983-84 about exposing Gukuru, and I was threatened by Emmerson.
Himself?
Yeah, because he was Minister of State Security. And so I didn't speak any more about it. I left it alone because the threat to me was very real. But in 1987, I decided, like I did in 2018, I'd had enough. And I decided to quit my government job and I went into the private sector. I was in the private sector until I joined the MDC, and I had to wind down my business interests because you can't be a politician and a businessman. No, you can't be a leader of the opposition here and at the same time be in business.
Since the president or then a minister threatened you personally, him personally, how again then did you now find yourself, find each other to now being probably close friends?
10 years in Parliament, in the opposition, I got to know all of these guys. You know, I can remember the first time I was elected, 2008, and we went into Parliament, and there was I sitting with these ZANU-PF guys in front of me, and they were the enemy. Those guys had been beating us up. They had been chasing us in the bush. They had been, killing our people. And I felt like sitting there throwing rocks at these guys. And then you get into the committees, and then you get into the debates, and you discover, there's a lot of common interests, and you develop mutual respect. And so I got to know all the ZANU guys during those days. And then when I retired in 2018, and I announced that I was retiring, first phone call was from the president to say, would I be prepared to help the government with the problems? And I said, of course yes. Of course yes. If your president phones you up, and he's the president, if he phones you up and he says, will you help do this and this and this, what do you say?
Naturally, I would agree.
Of course yes, you accept. So I accepted that, but I told him I didn't want a job. I don't want a job. I don't want to come to the office. I don't want to wear a tie. I don't want to earn a salary. I don't want to be incumbent. I want to be independent. If you want counsel, you want advice, you want me to do something, just tell me, and I will gladly help. So I've been working with government, but as a private sector guy, as a businessman, and we're doing a lot. We're doing a lot because the minute the president said to me, right at the beginning, he said, I want the private sector to lead the way. And I want you to mobilize the private sector to do that. So that's what I've been doing, and we've had considerable success.
Coming to your business endeavors, I've heard that you are working on a pipeline, probably a competitor to the Veruca pipeline. How true is that, and at what stage, if it's still in the works? Is it?
In 1987, that's 7 years after independence, I was the managing director of the Beira Corridor Group. Remember? At that stage, Beira was closed by sanctions, British imposed sanctions, hadn't worked for about 25 years. It was closed, it was derelict, the pipeline wasn't working, the railway line wasn't working. And I said to the business community, come on guys, we've got to open Beira.
Right.
It's in our interest. So we raised $750 million, and I built the pipeline from Veruca to Harare in 1987-88.
Okay.
So I built that pipeline. Why? From Veruca to Harare, because we closed the Veruca refinery. So then we reopened the pipeline from Beira to Veruca, and instead of pumping crude oil, we were pumping refined fuel. Right. So the 10-inch pipeline I'm the father of that. And when I went into the GNU, the Minister of Energy was Elton Mangoma. Elton asked me, can you find a company that will build a second pipeline, not for Zimbabwe, for the region? Because South Africa, in those days, everybody in the region drew their fuel from South Africa. There were 4 refineries in South Africa. You had Sasol, you had Shell in Cape Town, you had BP in Durban, you had some other petty one out in Mossel Bay. Today there are only 3. Only 1. 3 have closed down. So they've closed down. The older thing. So you can't buy fuel from South Africa now. South Africa is struggling to meet its own demand. So Botswana, Zambia, the Congo, they all said, can we help? Because they saw the pipeline, they saw it moving fuel to Harare. It's cheaper, it's quick, it's efficient. They said, can you build a second pipeline, but for us? So when Emmerson became, after the GNU collapsed, there was a corrupt element in the fuel industry here, which didn't want the competition. So they blocked the pipeline. When Emmerson became president in 2019 and 2018, in 2019, he asked me if we could revive the second pipeline.
So he knew about it.
Oh, right, from the beginning. And so in the last 3 years, we've been negotiating that. We've done all the negotiations. We're ready to go. We're now waiting for Mozambique to give the approvals. Okay. And I think with Chapo being appointed now, I think those approvals will come quickly. That's 2,800 kilometers of pipeline. We're building a pipeline Beira, Harare, Lusaka, Ndola, Congo, Harare, Bulawayo, Francistown, Polokwane. And we're
Polokwane as well.
Yeah, we're supplying northern South Africa, Limpopo province.
Right.
And then we're doing a pipeline from Chimoio to Tet to Blantyre. So it's 2,800 kilometers of pipeline.
Wow, that is strong. So this competition you speak of, that's that was Kudata Gure, right? I'm sure he was the one in charge of petroleum.
Kudu was
your sparring partner.
My sparring partner.
Right.
For 7 years.
Right. You were tussling.
Yeah. But in 2019, he called me and he said, Eddie, you can have the second pipeline.
Okay.
Because he was out of the fuel industry at that stage.
So he's gone out now?
Oh, he's completely out of the fuel industry now.
Okay. Doesn't he still own the...
No interest in the fuel industry. Covimbo was the thing he created after. He made a lot of money out of the fuel industry. Yeah. And he's put that money into Covimbo and to other things. Yeah. He owns ZB Bank. He owns 30% of this building. And so when you pass Kuda, you salute him.
Right. Very interesting. Going back a bit to the Gukura situation, you are from a Zimbabwean.
Yeah.
So obviously you have a first-hand understanding of what went on. As the current president, who is an associate of yours now, as he was the Minister of State Security then, do you think he would be the most ideal person to see through the solving or the closure of this chapter, seeing as he was an active member of government, more so the Minister of State Security? So obviously he got his command from up, but he was the minister
He
there.
was Minister of State Security.
So would he be the most
He
ideal
knew
person?
what was going on.
Right.
He knew what was going on. and Mugabe was determined to wipe out Zanu, which he did. Okay. I mean, I was a friend of Josh Nkomo. Josh used to come to my house in Bulawayo, and I can remember him weeping over what was happening. Emmerson, when he became president, if you listen to his speech in November 2017, he made two commitments. One was to fix the wounds of Gqeberha, to have reconciliation with the communities who were affected. The second was to fix the problem with the white farmers, with compensation. In 2018, he virtually made the same speech at the sports stadium in his inaugural speech. And he also repeated those two claims. Now today, what has he done? He has appointed 76 chiefs in the south of the country. All the chiefs whose districts were affected by Gqeberha. He's replaced a Shona chief with an Ndebele chief, but not just an Ndebele chief, with a member of the royal family. Yeah, Khumalo, Chief Khumalo. And he has instructed these 76 chiefs, with the support of the government, to start hearing cases on Gqeberha, where they can call the families in and say what happened, who was killed, who did this, who did that, and then fix compensation for the families involved. Not the government, the chiefs. I thought this was very clever. In a sense, this is what Kagame did in Rwanda. Because if you took a case which is now many years old, and you took it to an ordinary court, and you tried to try the commander of the 5th Brigade, who's not here anymore. Okay. You'd get nowhere. But in the cultural, in the Shona and Ndebele culture, those things can be provided for. And I think that the big thing is for people to know that somebody listened to my story. I remember talking to the matron in charge of Mpila Hospital when I was an MP in Bulawayo. And here's a woman, 58 years of age, heading one of the biggest hospitals in the country. And her father was murdered in the village, in front of them by the 5th Brigade. And when you talk to her about it, it was as if it was yesterday. It was always yesterday. Now that lady, that woman, needs to know somebody is going to listen to my story. But then not only that, but give me some sense of justice. Some sense of justice. And Kagame did that in Rwanda. Remarkable process. And I think this is very courageous, because it's going to reveal the truth. And the truth is going to be recorded. For the white farmers, he negotiated a deal. Now, you can't make peace if you're not going to negotiate with the hardliners. Ian Smith was never prepared to negotiate, really negotiate, with the leaders of the liberation movements. Had he been prepared to negotiate, do you really think that they wouldn't have negotiated a deal? Of course they would have. Of course they would have. But Smith refused. And the result was a lot of wasted lives. Right? So what he's done now, they've got $3.5 billion. That's 3,500 million US dollars for 4,500 farmers, white farmers. Huh? And And I can tell you, he's very committed. And many in his party say, why? These old liberation guys he was talking to yesterday, or if you ask them, should he pay the white farmers? They said, no, what for? But he said, it's a question of justice. And the international community is supporting him on that. And I think both those things are enormously courageous. And they come from this man. It's not from the party, it's this man.
Personally.
Yeah.
Right. And speaking of him, there's been a rumor that with ZANU-PF enjoying a two-thirds majority in parliament, and also there have been chants at rallies that he has addressed with party functionaries intimating that he will be here by 2030, whereas the constitution says he can only be president up to 2028. Do you think, since you know him personally, do you think he intends to amend the constitution so he can lengthen his term?
He's going to retire in 28.
You are sure of that?
Yes.
Come 2028, he doesn't retire.
He's going to retire in 28. And he's going to, but you know, look at Chimusoro in Mozambique. Samora Machel was assassinated in, do you remember when?
I think it was 1986.
86. Okay. Yes, that's right.
Somewhere
That's right. 86, 87. And so Chimusoro became president. He served 2 terms. At the end of his 2 terms, he retired. But he remained chairman of the party. Right. Today, he's chairman of the
He's still the chairman.
Yes. So when Nusi wanted a 3rd term, it was Chimusoro who said, You can't. The Constitution says 2 terms. We stick to that. Now, I think that probably we're going to find that Emmerson will follow his example. In other words, you like, who supported Chapo in the Central Committee? Wasn't Nusi. It was that old man,
the previous guy.
Chimusoro.
Right.
And what was the vote? 290 to 4. Because there's so much respect for Chimusoro. Because he was honest, he governed the country well. In fact, the new Mozambique is very much Chimusoro. And he's done amazing things. Mozambique, first time I went to Mozambique, 500,000 people were dying of starvation. I've never seen such terrible conditions. But they at the independence, they had 2 university graduates. Just two. The Portuguese were, Samora said to me once, he said, Mr. Cross, he said, if you were to choose to be colonized, you'd never choose the Portuguese.
They were
terrible. They were exploitive. And so, you know, I think that Emmerson might well choose to be exactly the same thing. In other words, to remain the godfather inside ZANU, to protect his heritage, his legacy, but also to ensure there's stability in the transition. Because if they allow, like, if Mozambique had allowed a fight last weekend in Frelimo, we have powerful regional and tribal interests all competing for the one post. And if there's no Sikhala, there's no elder to say, guys, cool it. This is the young man. He's the best guy for the future, new generation. Let's go that route. And so you maintain the stability in Mozambique. And I mean, goodness knows what's going to happen in South Africa next week. But it's not going to be pretty.
You think so?
It's not going to be pretty. And because down there, they'll fight each other.
And they're fighters by nature.
That's right.
Fighters.
That's right.
Right. And as for the president's appointment of his children, that his son in the Ministry of Finance, and some such appointments, do you think they speak well for democracy?
No. No. And I mean, when I was chief executive of a big company, I would never appoint a relative of mine to a position. Never. Absolutely wrong in principle. Okay. And I've spoken to to one of the boys, to David, who's the Deputy Minister of Finance. And he asked me, do you think it was right?
That's him asking.
Yeah, he asked me. And I said, no, I didn't think it was right. But David is proving to be fantastic. He's got 2 university degrees. He's 35. He's got a young wife. I think he's got 5 or 6 boys, some children. He's made his money himself. He doesn't get anything from his father. He's been working internationally. He's come home, and whereas previously he was probably earning, several $1,000s a month, he's now earning what, 2,500. He's sacrificed financially, and he's making a fantastic contribution in the ministry. He's helping the minister. He's taking some of the load of consulting people and listening to people and so on. He's really doing a phenomenal job. I don't know about the other son. I haven't had contact with him, but of course I work with, through the Minister of Finance, I work with David all the time. The question is, what's the motive? David doesn't think in any way that he's been put there because of 28. And, but if I was the president, I'd say you can't do too badly, because that's a youngster with real potential. Right. That's the next generation. Right. But I don't think he'll do that. What I know about Emmerson Mnangagwa today, this is a very careful man. I saw him yesterday, and I presented him with a document that I wanted him to sign. And I asked him, I said, would you sign that? He said, he looked at me and he said, Eddie, I will investigate, I will check this. Yeah. I won't sign it. Don't rush me. And so he's a man who doesn't move quickly. He's a man who doesn't move suddenly. He doesn't rush into things. He waits and watches. But this is an Ngwenya. The crocodile. Believe me, don't take him lightly. He's a tough guy. And if you cross him, you'll be in trouble.
Yeah, and also you're on record as you said, his Vice President, Chiwenga, would not take over from him after he retired, but he is the second in charge. Why do you think he wants that?
Being second in charge doesn't matter. It's like in the United States.
But if he was second in
the
charge,
Vice President is not automatic. If the President dies, then the Vice President takes over. Yeah. In fact, in our country, if the President dies, it's not the Vice President who takes over. It's the Speaker of the House of Assembly. It's Mzenda, Jacob. And that's constitutional. And now that the 2 Vice Presidents are appointed by the President, makes them totally civil, not elected, they're appointed by the President. I think, look, Chiwenga has ambitions. But if he's sensible, he's not well. He's just been to China again for medical treatment. I don't know what's wrong with him. Sometimes when I've seen him personally, he's not looking well. He's getting old. He's not a spring chicken anymore. He's like me. You need to call it quits when it's time to go. Right. And I think that the president will look for somebody, and I hope he'll look for somebody in the new generation. Because lots of young people in ZANU with real potential.
If you were to speculate on who possibly you may suspect or you think has the potential for the group, would you have any names?
I have no idea. No idea. In a sense, you can't, the political leadership can't be by selection. You've got to become the political leader. You've got to emerge. And I would say, let's give it time. I think eventually, we're a country which has accepted leadership for long periods of time. David Whitehead, he was 37 years. Mugabe, Smith was 17 years. Mugabe was 37. I think that someone will emerge, and I just pray that it's the right guy. But most of all, we need stability. We need continuity. We need stability. I've been saying to the Americans, stability is more important than democracy. You can manipulate democracy. I mean, when Kagame gets 94% of the vote, do you really think it's a democracy? No, it's not. It's a dictatorship. But the Americans think he's a great guy. You know, and anyway, that's the situation. That's the world in which we live.
No, perfect. Thank you. And now to the economy. Looking at the current state of the economy, do you think we're in a positive space, or we are still basically in the same space that we've always been? Like looking at right now, we have a new currency, the ZiG. Do you see it succeeding to be a strong currency that government wants this to be?
The ZiG has been a surprise. I think not just to me. I've been saying to my friends in the business world, who all universally, without exception, said, another currency, waste of time. It'll be gone in months. And I said to them, be careful, because the new leadership in the Reserve Bank, John Chiwenga, is very determined to hold the line on ZiG. He's very determined. And I said, what you might be surprised is you find that it's actually holding value. And if you look at the market today, I was talking to a major supermarket operator on Saturday, and he said, in my business, it's beginning to work. And I said to John Chiwenga, the crucial thing is, if I get 1,000 ZiG and I need to buy some US dollars or some rand to visit South Africa, I can walk into my bank and I can put my ZiG on the table and I will get rand or US dollars at the rate, at the official rate. Yeah. And I said, it's convertibility that is the ultimate test. Right. And I understand it's about 16, 17 to 1 on the market, but very small quantities. So I think obviously the people are still out there, but let me tell you, confidence in the ZiG is beginning to grow. And I'm not talking political. This is business confidence. And I think let's give them some time. They know what they've got to do. This is not rocket science. Look. I mean, 20 years ago, I went to Zambia. I walked into a bank in Osaka, in Osaka, and I put $200 US on the table. And the teller said to me, you want kwacha? She said, sir, you won't be able to carry the kwacha in huge amounts. Please go and buy a black plastic bag in the shopping mall nearby. So I bought a rubbish bag. I went back in. She loaded that thing. When I walked out of there, I was carrying this big bag of kwacha, $200. And when I paid for fuel in Lusaka with that, I didn't pay in one. I paid in blocks, all properly bound and so on. Today, 63 to 1, yes. Stable. Yes. What about the Medicash? Same thing as well. 1987, I'd been in Bara on business. I'd been using US dollars in Bara, but people were giving me Medicash in change. Right. I had a bucket of Medicash, like this, full. Right. So I stopped in a village on the way out. A woman on the side of the road selling coconuts. I took the bucket to her and I said, madam, how many of these can I buy with this? She took the bucket, she emptied the Medicash on the road, on the street, on the floor. She said, for the bucket, I'll give you 6 coconuts. But for the Medicash, nothing. Because it was worthless. Today the Medicash is what? It's stable. It's like yeah. It's not as strong as Zambia, but it's stable. It's been stable for 2 years. If they can do it, we're a much bigger economy. There's no reason why we can't do it. No reason. I've said for time and time again, the fundamentals here are right. And as far as the economy growing, do you live in a row? You've got eyes.
Yes.
Do I need to tell you that the economy is growing?
Yes, because as an ordinary civilian, right, my experiences with my capacity to have a disposable income to purchase stuff may be very limited.
Yeah, but look at the economy. Look at the economy. Look at the cars. Look at the traffic. Look at what's happening in this economy.
But would the traffic speak to an economy that is growing?
Of course, yes. What about the building? You can't buy bricks here. It takes you 3 months to get bricks, 4 months to get bricks out of cement is the same. You know, and all the companies supporting the building industry are absolutely booming. All of them. House goods, electro sales, they're all booming. The economy is growing, and I would say that we're probably the fastest growing economy in the region. But we are very, very informalized. And that is a problem. Because it means you've got, let's say, $100 billion economy, but our tax base is 50. So you have to tax these guys, we have to tax you heavily in order to get the money to provide education and health for everybody. So this is not healthy long term.
Right. I wanted to ask that, Peter, can the economy be sustained by merely overtaxing citizens? Like, can that really be sustainable?
No. Eventually you get law of diminishing returns. Right. I think we're there.
Right.
We're too highly taxed. We're very highly taxed. Formal sector here is very highly taxed. We've got to reduce, but then we've got to find an alternative. Now, the 2% IMTT tax was me.
That was your idea?
Yeah, because when Mtuli came into power, and he had a 40% deficit in his budget, 40 cents of every dollar they were being forced to borrow. I said to him, just put a tax on electronic transfer. Why? Because everybody was using these things. And he decided, he looked at the numbers, and said, yeah. So we put 2 cents, 2% on it. And in 6 weeks, we had a balanced budget. The IMF, watching from New York and Washington, said, what did you do? Is this magic? You know? And it was just that small tax, because that tax is on everybody.
So essentially, you are responsible for the thing that a lot of Zimbabweans are very unhappy about, that IMT tax.
But it's a very efficient tax.
Right, efficient, but at the same time, very uncomfortable to the majority.
But I mean, how much PAYE do you pay?
Yeah, well, I pay to a certain degree that I'm able to, produce.
Yeah. Let me tell you, the formal taxes are much bigger.
Right.
But the 2% tax is a very broad-based tax. Taxes everybody. Taxes everybody on everything. I tried to persuade the minister to put it in at 5%.
5%?
Yep. And then to drop PAYE. Why charge PAYE on these guys' salaries? Our PAYE is far too high. A young man earning here, what, $200 pays 25% PAYE? I mean, it's ridiculous. On a salary of $200. If I would make PAYE, make employment free of tax up to $2,000, $5,000. Tax the top guys, tax the wealthy guys. Okay? Where 80% of your PAYE comes from. 20% from the guys at the bottom. Don't tax them at all. Don't tax your civil service. Give them their full value. And then I also suggested drop company tax.
Possibly.
Yeah. No Zimra audits. No Zimra chasing these guys, saying you're not paying your tax. You claim this. Do all the way there. Just you have one tax and if you did it at 5%, you could replace PAYE, replace company tax, leave VAT.
But won't at 5% won't it cripple the majority who are already suffering?
5 cents in the dollar.
Yes, but cumulatively,
come on.
Cumulatively, it will definitely impact your pockets.
What is their net charge on electronic transfer? Do the numbers.
Yes.
Do the
So
numbers.
from an individual perspective, it looks like a minor amount of money, but collectively and cumulatively, it's a
But it gets tax on everybody. It broadens the tax base. And then if you did away, it means that the formal sector employee, would be much better off. So you'd have to actually encourage formal sector employment creation. And if companies didn't have to pay company tax, what would they do with their profits? They would invest them. They would invest them. It'd be a recipe for growth. Anyway, don't worry about it. You thought I was too radical.
Right. Definitely, on behalf of the rest of Zimbabwe, that was a bit radical. I'm glad you said for 2%. I was complaining, but now that I know there was a 5% on the table, I'm quite sure the 2% is.
He should have gone 5%. You're completely wrong.
And speaking of retiring from politics, you hung up your boots by your own volition.
Yeah.
Right. And it's not a very common trend for a Zimbabwean politician to retire. It seems everyone wants to go as long as they can. What do you have to say to your political class or your colleagues in politics in terms of this issue of retirement when you reach a certain age?
The reason why people want to stay on is either privilege or corruption. They want protection. Okay? If you've been corrupt while you've been in office, you don't want to lose power, because then you might be subject to prosecution. And if you are enjoying our time to eat, I remember a Kenyan politician saying, "It's our time to eat. So leave us alone. We must make money now. You had your time, it's now our time." When there was a change of political leadership in Kenya. And that also is completely wrong. I mean, I was in politics for 20 years. I made no money out of politics at all. It cost me money. It cost me money every month to be an MP. I had to support my constituents. You know what it's like to have 25,000 voters? 25,000. How many deaths every week? How many marriages? How many sicknesses? Education. When school fees come around, your phone burns. Yeah. And they turn to you. And but also your ward councillors, you've got to support them when they're fighting the election. That's it. Chamisa never supported his candidates financially. He spent the money on himself. You don't win elections by doing that. Good.
But three last things before we close on the segment. I want you to give advice to three constituencies. First, your advice to Nelson Chamisa and perhaps the opposition in the north.
You've got to regroup. You've got to rethink completely, and you've got to appoint new leadership. And I don't see any alternative to that. The present leadership, if they think they can continue and win elections against the ruling party in 2028, they're dreaming. They're dreaming. I think that's what I'd say to them. What was the other?
The next one is the president. When you speak to him individually, but President Kamila, you want to say something that just a word of advice to the president. That's important.
Once you're elected to a position, you carry the responsibility of that post. He has enormous responsibilities on his shoulders. I mean, I've seen him. I've been to see him when personally he's almost been falling asleep at his desk in front of me. And, the pressure and the tension and on him is just massive. He's got to manage that. One of my biggest criticisms of the president's office here is that he doesn't seem to have any support. You need someone to control who can come and see you. I go into the president's office in one of the top of the building, and there are peasant farmers from Hopewell sitting there. And I say, "What are you here for?" We have a conflict over cattle, and we're going to go and see the president. I said, "What the hell for? Go and see the governor. Not here."
Yeah.
Who's allowing those people into his waiting room? Who? And then when you do see him, where are his executive assistants? Where's his chief executive? I mean, if you go and visit the President of the United States, his chief of staff is there. And it's not the president that follows up. It's the chief of staff. The president gives him instructions. He needs a good team. And I think Sibanda might have been a great guy, the chief secretary. But the first chief secretary after independence was Charles Mteti. Charles was brilliant. He held Mugabe back. And he dealt with all the routine stuff. Absolutely brilliant. So that's what you need. In fact, you've got to be able to choose the people around you, make sure they're able to, and hold people accountable. If I made a decision as a chief executive that this was going to happen, I follow up. Has it happened? If it hasn't happened, why hasn't it happened? So if I was the president, I was driving past the street corner and there was a pile of rubbish there. I pick up my phone, I phone the mayor and say, "You devil, clean that up. I want it cleaned up. The next time I come past here, there must be nothing there. And if the next time I go past, there's still rubbish there, believe me, that guy is in trouble." Okay? Accountability. And if he does those simple things, also be connected with the people. Be connected with the people. Listen to it. But he does that. And of course, incorruptible.
You think he's incorruptible?
No. I think that corruption in this country has become endemic. And I think he's got to be much tougher on the ground. I mean, Wicknell has, what does he do?
He's giving away cars
yeah. And he bought a $7 million house. From who? From Jehuri. How did the commissioner of police get a house for $7 million? How? Not through his job. No, that's corruption. Why isn't that the asset of the state now? You know? And I mean, if you look around these towns, this place looks like Hollywood. It really does. And there, Wicknell, $7 million house, giving away cars, has half a dozen luxury cars in his yard, and he has no business.
This guy is always around the president. What do you think about the president hanging around people like that?
It should not be allowed. Let me tell you, that kind of character could never got near Morgan Tsvangirai. Never. And so I think he needs a filter. Okay? And he's got to start cracking down on corruption. We've got to start seeing some accountability. And the next...
finally, before my last question, which is your words to Zimbabwe, this question I've asked many opposition politicians, and they've not been able to really answer it. Seeing as the current government was constituted after a coup, right? Do you think if Chamisa or anyone in the opposition had won the election in 2018, the last year, the army would have allowed that person to take over?
No.
No chance.
Not for 5 minutes. And I told Chamisa in 2019, I said, if you'd won the election in 2018, you would have never seen the front door of State House.
They would never allow that.
No. And, the young soldiers, the young army officers, because the coup was run by young people.
Not the generals.
Run by the young people. In the middle of the coup, Mugabe wanted to appoint Chiwenga as president. And he sent an executive, he sent a senior member of staff to Cranbourne Barracks to ask the coup guys running it there. Because they took over the country in 24 hours. Started at 9 o'clock in the morning, Presidential Guard, then the police. By 8 o'clock in the evening, they had the whole country controlled. He said, what the answer of those guys was? Absolutely not. Our man is Mnangagwa.
That's the army.
That's the army. 100%. And I've got no doubt at all that the army remains loyal to Emmerson. Now the question, we got, they wanted to appoint Sibanda, the commander of the army, to the Politburo, and I understand that he declined the appointment.
He was actually appointed by the president, but he didn't check out the.
I want to be a professional soldier. I'm not a politician. And I think that Sibanda's example has been very, very good. Because, in the kind of political culture we've grown up in, the army is a political weapon. I mean, under apartheid South Africa, it was the police and the army. Under Mugabe,
Basically,
CIO, police, and that's large. I don't feel my feeling about Zimbabwe today is that it's a much freer country. It's a much freer country compared to Mugabe, and much freer. And there's complete freedom now of the media. There's freedom of expression. I remember visiting Malawi when Dr. Banda was president and going to a cocktail party. And nobody would talk politics with me. If I asked a political question, the Malawians moved away from me because they were terrified. They were terrified. Because if you raised a hand against Chimusoro, prison, and then you disappear.
But if we say it's freer, I could give an example where someone may dispute that point. We had Sikhala being imprisoned pre-trial for a lengthy period of time. We had HopewellChin'ono being arrested for simply reporting on corruption.
Both of them are really just street kids. Hopewell.
Yes, but they are arrested simply for disseminating information. And it can't be freer.
No. Those two guys deserved everything that was coming to them. I can tell you, for Sikhala, hey, I tell you,
he's your colleague, by the way, from
the attorney. I asked the Attorney General, why are you holding Sikhala? She said, every time we would try and release him, he breaks his conditions of bail and goes back to jail. I think it was a political mistake. I don't think this fellow was worth the attention. He loved being in jail. He loves being pictured in chains, Love being the victim. But please, both of those guys, I know both of them well from MDC days.
And you think Hopewell is a street kid? I mean, he's just talking about corruption. There's a corruption scandal he spoke about.
But it's easy to talk about.
And he's arrested.
But it's easy to talk about that.
But
I don't know what he was doing. I don't know what justified his arrest. But both of those guys should not have been treated as they were treated. It was a political mistake.
Yeah.
And I think the president must know that.
Yeah. Finally, your words to Zimbabweans, what do you want to say to the people of Zimbabwe? Head across to Zimbabwe.
Well, first of all, I'd say have faith in the future and have faith in yourself. Life in Zimbabwe is not easy, but it's not easy anywhere. And if you're going to live in Zimbabwe, you have to make a living for yourself. We employ today 20% of adults, so 80% of adults have got to find their own way in the world. And that means you've got to go into business. And I would just say to young people, my experience is work hard, work honestly, and if you can't make it in this country, then go to somewhere where they'll give you a dole and you live on the state. But if you're going to stay here, we are enterprising people. But main thing is don't give up hope. If you give up hope, then there's no chance. Now, I remember back in 1976 when I was in Rhodesia, and I was a young executive climbing the ladder in the business world. And I see all my friends leaving the country because with the war, sanctions, and I prayed about it, and God said to me, "You stay." So we've stayed, and my children are here, and my grandchildren are here, and we are Zimbabweans, 100%. And have we suffered for that decision? I think we've had a great life. My children have grown up well. They're all responsible citizens, well educated, and they're all doing well in their own spheres of influence. And that's what really matters.
Just as a last retort, looking at how the Rhodesian government managed the economy, what they built from 1965 to 1980, and how the economy was left at the point of independence, do you think they were better managers purely on the economic side and management of it?
I think they were completely underrated. When I look back on those days, I look back at the management of the Reserve Bank, the management of the country, financial or industrial. Hey, those guys, they were clever. When I look at how Zisco was built, for example, and I see the way they had the fertilizer industry, and they produced gas. I looked at Zisco; they had the gas ovens, and they fed the furnaces, and all integrated. They were clever guys. 1983, 1986, after the first Liberation War, my ancestors were building a kilometer of railway line every day.
Just 1896.
A kilometer every day. When they built the bridge across the Zambezi, which even today must be one of the most outstanding mechanical engineering in the world. It was, when they built it in Europe, it was 1 centimeter short. And they waited until the sun came up, heated the steel, and joined Kariba. Kariba today is the biggest lake in the world. We built Kariba in 3 years, inside budget, and we've had virtually free electricity ever since. But, those guys, I underrated them as part of the generation. But now, when I look at what did Smith do to prepare people for government? What did we do? When the first ZANU government came into power here, we had 17 PhDs in the government, best educated government in Africa, but they had no experience. We fortunately had an outstanding Minister of Finance who did have some experience, and but the rest of the crew had no experience at all, had to learn on the job. Is that we never been given responsibility. I mean, in my personal company, when I died, they had to find a chief executive to go into my company. He didn't know anything about the company. What would happen? It would be a disaster. And that's what happened in 1980. Smith lost power. All his guys left the country. In 1 year, what was left? Nothing. In 5 years, there were 2 white civil servants left. In 1980, 60% of the civil servants were white people. They left the country. And they didn't transfer their skills.
Right, they simply left.
They just left. And the guys here had to appoint new people. But that's the story of Africa. The Congo. How many graduates did they have in the Congo at independence? Nothing. Mozambique, 2 graduates. And yet you go to Mozambique today and you see what they've done.
Amazing.
It's a miracle. It's a miracle. In a way, because our economy was more diversified, was more indigenous in the sense that it was here, the collapse has been greater because there was no real handover takeover. And that was my generation's problem. And so I don't blame the ZANU for the collapse. I think we could have done things better. Corruption has been a major problem. In 1975, China was poorer than Zimbabwe. In 1975, Singapore was even poorer than China. And you look at them today, 50 years later, first world. We could have been, but the colonials, and I mean, I know that Africa blames the colonial, but it's perfectly true. What did we do in India? The colonials. We ran India in the interest of Britain. We stripped India of its resources. We stripped India of its wealth. And then we walked out. We took our administration, took our army, our police, everybody out. 10 million people died in India in the transition from British colonial rule to independence. 10 million people died in tribal conflict. And you don't have to be a genius to say this was going to happen. Of course it was going to happen. And the instructions to Lord Mountbatten when he dismantled the British administration in India, and they ran everything. When he dismantled that, his instructions from London, from the government of London, Britain, was to get Britain out of India without any casualties. And he did that. But he left behind a complete mess. Chaos.
Thank you so much, Eddie Cross, for giving us your time. I know you're a busy man, you're a businessman, but you allowed us a few hours of your time. Thank you so much. And thank you again for watching Zimbabwe. Keep tuned in. Cheers.